Thank you for the information. We'll go to Councilman Harsh.
Mr. Chairman, can you put me down?
Councilman Spencer? Yes. Yes, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. It's great to have everyone back at the table. I wanted to start with looking at the slide here, just getting our basic numbers straight here. The annual budget on the slide is $4.7 million. Can we explain through the chair what is the Chodo home, the $1.7 million? What is that used for?
Sure. Through the chair to the councilwoman. So CHODO stands for Community Housing Development Organization. They are private nonprofit entities that can do not just housing development, but also affordable housing development. The home program requires that 15% of all home funds go to support CHODO organizations or CHODO projects. So we're required to do that. The number you see there, that $1.7 million, is more than, if you add those two up, it's $4.7 million. That's more than 15%, but that 4.7 consists of this current allocation we're getting and some funds that we have that are encumbered but not yet spent. So there's a number of CHODO projects that we have that we're currently working on a closing right now with hopes that the shovels will be in the ground come July or August.
And if I could, Councilwoman, on 2.3,
Right.
on the chart,
Yeah.
it highlights the prior year funds and the 2024 allocation. And for all those who are listening.
Where's that at?
In your packet on 2.3,
2.3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you got it.
So, okay, so thank you. So to clarify, the CHODO set aside is for CHODO operating funds or for CHODO or CHODO projects? Mr. Chair?
Specifically for the project. So this would fund the hard construction, like the bricks and mortar, of the CHODO's project.
So through the chair, would the CHODO also apply for Housing Trust Fund dollars, just like every other organization? They would just essentially have a leg up because they're a CHODO and a little bit, they have baked in, there's a better chance that they would be funded because they're a CHODO, through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, yes, that's correct. We have to make sure that we are spending 15% of those funds on a CHODO project. And so to do that, we ask in the application, are you a CHODO? And that's how we're making that decision when we go through.
Okay. Through the chair, I don't think there are that many CHODOs around. Am I mistaken? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, there's a handful, 3 or 4 maybe. The ones that come to top ahead are Cleveland Housing Network, Northwest Neighborhoods, Famico's, and Burtonville Carr.
And I can say Northwest Neighborhoods is not going to be submitting a project for a while, so they'll be off the plate there. So is there a reason, so are we through the chair then at that 15% calculation for the new funds that have come in this year, not prior year funds, not adding them all up together, for the new funds, are we at 15% of the total through the chair?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, up to this point, yes, but for future funds, we'll have to make sure that we look at the projects and what they're asking for and ensure that we're always at that 15% threshold.
We don't have the I think what I mean is, okay, I'll do the math later. I think what I mean is, I'll get to the point I'm driving at in a minute here. So I just wanted to understand this relationship between the CHODO and those two numbers and the new funds that have come in versus stuff that's encumbered but being carried over from prior years. Okay. So through the chair, I wanted to ask Mr. Bango, so in terms of new money, that new Housing Trust Fund dollars that are available that non-CHODO organizations can apply for this year, we're talking about $3 million. Is that accurate through the chair?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, about, yes.
Okay, well, I don't know why maybe it's just this afternoon. I'm not doing well with my numbers
Right.
this afternoon. But okay, so I think I wanted to ask then, so let's say we're looking at $3 million as the pot of more or less, okay? new dollars that have come in for Housing Trust Fund. What is the volume of applications anticipated relative to that of those available funds? How much are we going to get in requests versus available funds?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, so applications are due on July 1st, and I won't know for a matter of fact until July 1st. However, this is going to be an extremely competitive year. Most of the experts in the region who compete for low-income housing tax credits, 9% low-income housing tax credits, which is one of the multiple pools of tax credits, we're expecting us to get 1 or 2 projects. 2 was kind of optimistic, and we got 4 because of OFA's set-aside requirements. So we're already getting somewhere between 400 and 200% of what we expected. On top of that, the state has a new program that they went through rounds earlier this year that some of you may be aware of, called the State Low-Income Housing Tax Credits, or OLITEC is what I like to call them. They plan that program was a success, and they plan to do it again later this year, and I expect to have more projects competing for our funds. I don't quite know what that means from a budget perspective, but I am expecting an extremely difficult year when it comes to the amount of funding that we have currently and making decisions on how we can support a project in a way that uses our funds as effectively as possible.
And I just want to take a moment through the chair to let the director know that I really appreciate Mr. Bango. Anytime I've had questions about this, as we go along, he's always been really responsive in terms of answering the questions. So there's a lot to what you just said, but I will refrain from going down that rabbit hole at the table at the moment. But I think the bottom line is, so first of all, we've gotten bad news, right, that we've gotten fewer funds than we were hoping in home. We have the inflation pressure, so in real dollars, it's even less than less. And we have a huge demand. And this happens year over year. So I kind of want to take a moment to zoom out and ask a philosophical question, having this whole team on the other side of the table. Has the city ever done anything to sweeten the pot, to grow the pot in terms of gap funding? Have we only ever relied on just home, or have we used other sources? And what do we do? I think, you answered the question in terms of volume of projects, but in terms of dollar amount, through the chair, do you have a sense of the dollar amount of requests that are going to be coming in for $3 million in funding, if you had to take a guess?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I think that number could anywhere be between like 7 million and 15 million. So I think that number, man, the range on this is,
Yeah.
So that number, it's like an inch. Through the chair to the councilwoman, on the low end, based on the information I just gave you about us getting 4 awards this year, I know 3 of those projects are probably going to ask for like 1.6 million, and one of them is going to ask for $600,000 or $800,000. And then we have the state application. So I think really we're probably looking at 7 million on the low end and 15 million on the high end.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, have we ever had a discussion about how do we do better with gap financing? I just feel like we know it's not enough, but have we ever had conversations about how to grow the pot? I think is the question I'm driving at.
Through the chair, I don't want to speak on it certainly in detail, but but there is legislation that is out there, a legislative request that's out there, that is a program between LISC, which stands for Local Initiative Support Coalition. And this is a fund between the partners LISC and actually Key Bank, and hopefully many other banking partners to participate. And the goal is to have a revolving fund that Tony can speak a little bit more broadly, though.
Sure. Through the chair to the councilwoman, the thing that the director is talking about is it's a fund, hopefully about 5 times the size of the city's investment that can provide low-cost capital, therefore reducing gaps and reducing the ask of the city. So with lower cost capital, so as you know, with the pandemic, there's been a lot of things that have driven costs. Some of that is construction costs, some of it is inflation, some of it's interest rates are up 5% over the last 3 years. This could be providing interest rates at a rate of like 4.5% to 5% potentially, and also a lower debt coverage ratio capacity, which means not only can they borrow more because the interest is lower, but they can borrow more because the bank will just let them have more with the same cash flow. Therefore, if they're borrowing more, they're asking the city for less, and it makes it more competitive and easier for them to do projects here in Cleveland.
So through the chair, we know, Councilwoman, that we have to be able to grow the pot. Part of the work that I've tried to do with the department in the last few years is to make sure that we're in a really good position to receive additional dollars, and then get us to a point where we can be more aggressive about going out and getting those dollars. But you have to make sure that you've got a solid foundation first, and that's what we've been shoring up. So my hope is that through what we've been able to show about how much we can flex up through what we experienced through ARPA. My hope is that we can be much more attractive to these partnerships and trying to get additional dollars into the city of Cleveland. It's something that we all know is absolutely needed, and is something that we are taking into consideration as we try to understand how can we grow the pot, because we know, right, hearkening back to the earlier presentation, we have a tremendous amount of need in housing, all types of housing, and so to preserve, protect, produce, this is more so on the produce side of things. Yep. So we're trying to get creative where we can, where we have program income. How can we quickly turn it around? And it's a tough situation to be in, because we know that the need is so great, and it is something that we're keeping an eye on. But we welcome more.
Thank you for the information about the LISC, the potential of this new low-cost capital program. In terms of growing the pot, have there ever been discussions about internal city resources, whether, could not just home, but CDBG be used for block grant or for gap financing? Could bonds be used for gap financing? Like, are there any internal resources to the city that could also be looked at to grow this pot?
Through the chair, we are having some internal conversations, but at this point for this year's budget, we don't have any additional funds that have come to bear.
Okay. I just think it's I feel like, every year we're stuck in this scenario where it just falls far short. The available resources fall far short of what the need is, especially when we are all looking at that 2030 housing study and knowing those big numbers that we need to strive for. I wanted to ask through the chair, just to understanding something else that Mr. Bango presented on, which is something about the non-LIHTC projects in terms of what's anticipated for these Housing Trust Fund awards. What is an example of a non-LIHTC project that would be, or what if it's not a LIHTC project, what is it, through the chair?
So through the chair to the councilwoman, I would call it a normal project. Many times a non-LIHTC project could be something like Habitat for Humanity's single-family homes. They're a good example of a full affordable project that is not using any type of tax credits. But another good example is Hawthorne Elementary, which is something that just closed recently, over a year ago, 2804 Moreland. I wish we could use home funds, or our program funds, more generally speaking, this way, where we had a abandoned, on the demolition list, historic building on South Moreland, and a developer got federal historic tax credits and state historic tax credits, but wasn't going after the low-income housing tax credits. And because of our investment in the deal, which we were at I think 22% of the total cost of their project, their 23-unit building had 8 affordable units for 15 years, and the rest were all market rate units.
I think that's what I wanted to clarify. Are we able to use home funds for market rate projects? I'm not saying that, I think, I would presume that the primary goal of these funds is affordability, although your scoring criteria is a little more diverse than that. But these are federal funds through Housing and Urban Development. Are they not restricted to affordable projects only? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, they require a number of affordable units proportionate to the city's investment in the deal. So if we're 30% of the deal structure, then 30% of the units need to be affordable. And there's separate rules for that. So they can be used with market rate projects. The problem with market rate projects is that when they receive money from us, they're no longer market rate. So that's one. That means they lose cash flow because their rents are now lower. And then usually market rate projects are doing all this pre-development work towards the end of the cycle. They're getting their phase one, they're doing their market study, they're finalizing their architectural drawings.
I can hear you.
Sorry about that. So their market rate projects are always spending all these costs associated with figuring out the project closer to the end when they're about to start construction. Our program is requiring them to do that on the outset, which means they're spending $50,000 to $100,000 that they could potentially lose before they've really locked in the rest of their sources.
All right. I thank you very much for the information. I think I'm, feeling stuck, Mr. Chair, just because here we are again, right? With housing gap and just the need far exceeding the available resources and more to come. But I don't know how council can be helpful, but just in terms of growing that pie, growing that pot, I would really welcome conversations about that. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Where council needs to just draw a line in the sand and say, this is what we're going to fund. I know budget priorities are presented to us, but it's up to us whether we accept them or not. And so, I'm talking about the general fund budget. So, and other resources that come along. If either we're going to have to continue doing the same old thing, or this body, who is the legislative arm, need to make a decision on whether we want to get our acts in line and put more money towards gap financing for these much-needed projects in our city. So it's on us, regardless of who wants to do what, right? All right, thank you. Councilman Harsh and Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I think we just had a "you're so from Cleveland" moment where the joke is that you're from Cleveland if the question, what project isn't a LIHTC project, is a sincere question. It was a great question. It was a great question. We just live in the world of if it's a project, it's a LIHTC project, right? So what's not? Yeah, right. Federal. No. It was a good question. Anyway. I only have one question, Mr. Chair, through the chair. So the accomplishments here have been almost doubled and actually doubled in the 22 and 23 year, which I know part of this is the rolling nature of 7 years to reach accomplishments with CDBG funds. But my only question is this a result of very humble proposed accomplishments, or did something wiggle free in the pipeline that allowed a bunch of projects to get done, or are we just recognizing or realizing efficiencies in the work done here? There's a couple places where actual exceeds proposed, but not typically so quickly.
Through the chair to the councilman. So I think you're right. It comes from a humble proposal. When that proposal for the program started, I don't know, probably in the early teens, I would think. But it does vary. I believe 2 years ago we had a production of like 350 units. Last year we had 242. This year we've got quite a number of large unit projects. So I expect next year's number to be quite a bit higher.
Through the chair, I would imagine that it's kind of an all of the above situation. When things work and things tend to shake out, it's an all-and approach. So I do believe that we have the right person leading the team. I do believe that we also had an increase through of activity through ARPA. So it wasn't all, there was additional money out there for gap financing. And I do think that, it's fruit that's come to bear when we are doing those things, like actually taking the time to give technical assistance to many developers. So I think it's an all-and situation, and probably a little bit of everything.
Okay, well, it's good to see. That's all I had. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These funds are been proposed by the federal government to hopefully, over time, improve the conditions of poor people and to revitalize a community and allow for those who are impoverished and the elderly to have accessibility to affordable homes. So these units that we have, Mr. Chairman, that have come into play, how much is the average rent?
Through the chair to the councilman, it's difficult to say because it functions based on unit size, but a studio apartment, I believe, is like $800. No, one bedroom is like $800 to $850, and a 3-bedroom, I think, is like $1,500 a month, based on the current regulations.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing this right. So we're running this program out, and you're saying that the market space right now for affordable rents is $850 on the low end for a studio apartment, and maybe with 1 bedroom, $1,500 a month?
So through the chair to the councilman, it's not the market, that's the federally mandated, and it depends on the AMI level. So for instance, if a project is including, so for instance, with some of the home art projects that we're working with, it requires that all the units that we're funding be 30% AMI or less, and those units are like, I think $500 a month is what the rent is for them. There is no like average for the whole portfolio.
I see. So if you have 30% AMI, you can rent a studio for $300 is what it sounds like to me, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Tony Bango?
Through the chair to the council person, without looking at the regs off the top of my head, that's probably a little on the low end, but not too far off.
What about for a 2-bedroom?
Through the chair to the council person, I think, and it's been about 2 weeks since I looked at those rent numbers. I say that's probably $1,100 to $1,200, if I recall correctly, at the 60% area median income level.
Well, that's pretty steep to me, Mr. Chairman, to the administration for being able to help people out. Now, these LIHTC projects and I don't know if they've improved in terms of the quality of housing when you go in there. A number of times I've had to take a look, one of them being a project in my neighborhood. I told them about certain things that we're looking for, and I'm not quite sure where that project is at, on Fulton School, Robert Fulton.
Through the chair to the council person.
Do we know where that's at?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
Do we know, Director?
Through the chair, we can pull. I know Trudy was here earlier. McKeel, if you have any.
So through the chair to the councilman, Fullerton just recently went back out to RFP. Those were received and will be reviewed with the hope of selecting a developer to be able to move forward with a new construction project.
Right. Is it the same one that it was before?
Again, through the chair, we received the proposals, but we have not selected a proposal, so there's no same one.
And Mr. Chairman, because communities like mine, when this project in particular was put together, it was put together several years ago, and we're still sitting here not seeing anything fundamentally materialize. And so then the question would be, Mr. Chairman, to the director, going right back out for bid and getting someone else to come in here, because these projects that you're talking about is extremely difficult, Mr. Chairman. First, to get the funding from the financial institutions, one, and then two, Mr. Chairman, to get funding from the state. And so that leads me to this question, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Bango. When it comes to, and I know that everything is controlled by the Republicans downstate, well, why do they, you know, it takes so long to get a project pushed through here for Cleveland, and it seems like it's easier in certain parts of the state where they're getting anything and everything they want, for starters. And then two, why so cheaply? Why so many rules on the size of an apartment, the size of a bedroom? It seems like the state legislature is so detailed in on that to such a degree, Mr. Chairman, that it almost is if you're paying this kind of money, $850 to $1,500, you should get something that really, Mr. Chairman, doesn't look poor or poorly looking. And so some of these properties seem, Mr. Chairman, to just seem like it's not, it just seems almost as if you know it's going for the poor people. And what can we do to change that?
Thank you for that question, Councilman. Through the chair, Tony, I would really like for you to talk about some examples across the different wards of some of the projects that we've closed on in the past couple of years with these funds, so that we can help to reorient on what type of projects these are
Yeah.
and who they serve.
So through the chair to the council person, you know, we have a pretty rigorous internal property design standard that we enforce, and we work pretty closely with our partners in the Department of Planning to make sure that these buildings are going to last as long as they can. I can't really think of any LIHTC projects that don't look very well or are struggling, you know, but really before year 15 off the top of my head in the city of Cleveland. So a number of projects. I know in Ward 1, we're actually in the process of closing Hope Homes, which is with Cleveland Housing Network, working on that right now. We've got a number of other projects we're trying.
You know, I want to work with you on that one because I've went and seen some of their housing, and it doesn't match up to you know, our standard. You know, if you're going to build a home, build a home. Quit trying to build a cheap home. And then I get the response, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Tony Bango, that it's what the state requires. We're getting money from the state, so the state requires us to put this little piece over here, or to use these types of materials versus other materials. And I've been in those homes, and I know what a home is supposed to look like and feel like. It's supposed to feel like and look like a real home, not something that you banty together and just throw up. I mean, I've seen houses where, Mr. Chairman, to the director, we've just come to accept low standards. And if those standards, Mr. Chairman, is coming from the state, then shame on them, Mr. Chairman, that they should treat poor people in such a way where they have one product for one group of people and another product for another group of people. And so when it comes to you building homes in my neighborhood, we don't want you to go and build up something quick and fast that's a shack that ain't gonna last long. We want some quality housing. And the people and the citizens, because it seems like right now, Mr. Chairman, they're going to pay a lot of money for these units. So they should be able to get some units that, you know, are looks like something of quality and standard, and versus something that you just throw together real quick. And I've seen some of these homes, Mr. Chairman, where over time they don't wear well. And they fall apart and disrepair. We even have some of these homes that they built that I've seen in certain parts of neighborhoods, which this time I won't mention. But I can't even believe, Mr. Chairman, that we have even allowed for certain developers to come in here and give us such crap. And so I only say that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to sit down, Director, with Mr. Tony Bango and go to some of the sites that you're talking about referring to here, so I can see for myself that if there's any changes. Because the last time I went to some of these sites and these locations, I wasn't a happy camper. And I even let CHN know that, that you should build with a better quality versus the way you're developing it out now. And the attitude, Mr. Chairman, and here's what really gets me, Mr. Chairman, that just drives me up a wall, is the concept that they should just be so glad that they got something. It's better than nothing. They should just be happy that they got a house. And when you go and look at those houses and the quality of those houses, it just doesn't look right. So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that I support the program. I know that there's only but so many developers, I guess, that are certified to do this work. Is that correct? And do we have enough to, so I guess what I'm saying that let's build a quality product, Mr. Chairman, to the director that all of us can be happy of, and the citizens who are considered poor, because if you're paying $850 to $1,500, that don't seem like it's an affordable rate. It seems like it's almost market rate. That's a lot of money for a Cleveland market.
Through the chair, I couldn't agree with you more. What it sounds like is that, Tony, we should probably set up a housing trust fund, housing development office tour, and maybe we can set up some tours for later on in the summer so that we can show exactly where we are in the process of some of these projects.
And then, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to hold you up on this chapter longer, but doing that is important, and I definitely want to be a part of that. But then the distinguished counsel lady, Jenny Spencer, talked about, doing something different. And if we could do something in this market space the same way, maybe, have some kind of summit of discussion on how do we improve the program? How do we get the financial institutions, which you've heard me long say here at this table, they're not involved. They're not involved in our neighborhoods and our communities. And because of their long-term absence of financial assistance to citizens who have the resources, to have the credit worthiness, these financial institutions are not loaning their money. And they have all of these blanket reasons why they shouldn't loan us those resources and funds for improving our properties and for being able to purchase other properties that are next door to us, but they prefer, Mr. Chairman, to fund and finance outsiders that come in and buy our homes in our market space. So it would be great, Mr. Chairman, to see some of these financial institutions, with some kind of hybrid operation, Mr. Chairman, as a ways and means of solution, Mrs. Spencer, to get involved in this whole proposition and how can we leverage those dollars. Now, with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I don't mind working with the director to be able to be involved with any which way the director and administration would like me to be involved. But, I'm tired on this end of the table, hitting and banging the table about our financial institutions in the city of Cleveland should be more responsible to the citizens, help us with these projects so that we can expand the growth and development of the city, as well as retain our existing residents and bring new residents into the city of Cleveland. So for me, Mr. Chairman, I hope that once we finish with this round here, then the next question comes down, because what we're talking about is, in part of this program, is gap financing. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman, the director?
Through the chair to the councilman, that's correct.
Right. So also, Mr. Chairman, making available gap financing in neighborhoods so that we can spur housing development, where we can spur the natural housing development in communities and neighborhoods. Because, Mr. Chairman, when I went on the outside of the city of Cleveland and started touching base with the various different housing developers, and I touched base with 9 of them, and I got sort of a consensus between them all, and a consistency between them all, that they did not want to do work here in the city of Cleveland. And part of the reason why that was, Mr. Chairman, was because of the simple fact that they said it was too much tape to cut through here in the city of Cleveland to get anything fundamentally done and up and off the ground. So the question would be, how do we bring in new developers into our market space and be able to use the financial institutions along with gap financing so that we can stir a market space and help with the redevelopment and building of new homes, the rehabilitation of existing homes, so that we can shore up our neighborhoods. Because the programs that you have in place right now that you have reviewed across this table this morning, Mr. Chairman, are excellent. It helps with some parts of those problems and issues that we have in our neighborhood. But we need to have the market and the financial assistance from our financial institutions to help push that space a little bit quicker. And I didn't know, Mr. Chairman, if the director, if you could comment on that.
Through the chairman, absolutely look forward to having those conversations with you all and to partner to speak truth to power where we need to, and to trying to increase housing in all of its forms here in the city of Cleveland.
And the gap financing, can you talk about that? Can we use that on market rate?
Through the chair to the council person, yes, it can be used in combination with market rate developments, but any project that gets funds from this source has to have a certain percentage of its units affordable at a rate. There's a bunch of details there, but if it's a single family house and one home dollar is put in it, it has to be sold at 80% AMI. So if you're talking about single family for sale, then it has to be 100%. It has to be affordable, all of them.
So do we have gap financing available separate from this program that we can use to bring developers in, Mr. Chairman, to the director? I thought we did.
Through the chair, outside of ARPA, no, not specifically, which I believe gets to Councilwoman Jenny Spencer's line of questioning earlier.
So did we use all of the ARPA funds? And if so, why wasn't neighborhoods like mine included in being able to get some of those funds?
So through the chair.
Yeah, sure. Through the chair to the councilman, we're probably about, I think, 60 or 70% through the process with the ARPA funds at this point, and we're currently working with the last remaining amount and the people that received awardees. Any award that did or did not receive funding was based on scoring and project viability, basically. I think.
And excuse me, though, and submitted projects.
Correctly submitted projects. Yeah, that's it.
Well, here's my issue, Mr. Chairman. Communities like the Lee Harbor neighborhood, we don't have a whole lot of areas where we can actually do some whole-scale developments, but we do have a lot of vacant lots. And one of the things, Mr. Chairman, I will say to the director, which is really important, which I haven't seen the likes of since Terry Hamilton Brown was the executive director of community development, and that is having developers build houses in every ward and having developers that were in process of doing that. I remember, Mr. Chairman, at the time, they had built over 150 new homes in my neighborhood, and we're still prime with a number of lots where we could do development. So I would like to see, Mr. Chairman, that kind of approach, especially when we're using gap financing, to bring in a developer. One of the developers that was developing all across the city of Cleveland building homes was a Ken Laurie. And I don't know if the city can get back to that space and time, because that's when it worked. That's when those kind of programs were really fundamentally working. Every single neighborhood, Mr. Chairman, had a project in their neighborhood. And they had a street which they had fixed up in their neighborhoods, or 2 streets, or 3 streets. So I just think, Mr. Chairman, we need to look at how can we realistically, holistically look at how we heal not just some parts of the city of Cleveland, but we're having an impact in every single space in the city of Cleveland. So I don't know what that would look like, Mr. Chairman, but we need to really look into that and go back to those things that really fundamentally work to shore up our housing market. Because right now we're waggering in the winds, and we're floating away, and people are leaving. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would hope that, and then I want to hear if you remember Have you heard any of that kind of talk where you had projects in every single neighborhood that we used to have way back when? Can we get back to that? Not just certain neighborhoods get all the works, get all the money, get all the resources, but distribute it so that you keep stable neighborhoods like Lee and Harbor that unfortunately has not developed a housing stock since last time I was there. We haven't built any of that level of homes.
Through the chair, we're excited for the work that we're doing in middle neighborhoods, of which your neighborhood is counted as a middle neighborhood. We are excited to continue the work in asset redevelopment, and so that's the arm of the department that Trudy resides over, which is both taking, those old school sites like the former JFK site in your ward, as well as the former Gracemont site in your ward, as well as aggregations of parcels. And I believe that is also in your ward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me just say this. I appreciate those projects there, but what I'm referring to, Mr. Chairman, because that's a long time overdue. What I'm referring to, Mr. Chairman, is to get into a space where your department can start the proposition of developing new housing on these vacant lots. So on all of the vacant lots, not just in Ward 1, per se, but how do we get back to a space where, they had these developers really churning. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, what it was and how it was that they did all of the proposition of the details of that, but it was quite impressive. And I know that, and let me just say this, and I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, to the Director of the Administration's focus on the Southeast, because the Southeast section of the city of Cleveland haven't had an investment, and I don't know when. So all of our citizens are very thankful for getting some work done and hopefully seeing some significant improvements in the neighborhood, as, of course, we work very hard to be able to try to get the powers that be to look over into that neighborhood, and we're very appreciative of that. But it would be really nice, Mr. Chairman, if we could get into a programming that will be something where we bring in the developers, just like you are bringing in all those different contractors, Mr. Chairman, which I got to say is a yeoman's job. It's good that you're putting that whole piece in there. I'm impressed by it. But also the same thing with trying to get good housing developers to come into the city of Cleveland with some kind of incentives, Mr. Chairman, is what I'm suggesting to the director, from our financial institutions, in addition to something that we could bring to the pot to sweeten it up somehow with matching funds, maybe getting one of our financial partners, along with some monies that we may have to the side, to really start talking about how do we jumpstart really developing houses and properties all throughout, and especially in the poor and impoverished areas. How do we move that needle, so to speak?
Through the chair, that is exactly the work of the asset redevelopment group that is now paired with land bank, so that we can take any land, any property that we have site control over, and to put it into more productive use. And so that's something that you should see more and more of. We've got some other opportunities coming out. I know in Councilman McCormick's area, we're continuing to do RFPs as often as we can, whether they're old sites that haven't been used or whether there are aggregations of land bank parcels. And we're also doing things like, unfortunately, I won't be able to be with you all tomorrow because I have a speaking engagement in Dallas. But part of that work of going to a national conference and talking about Cleveland is to attract developers from out of town, to tell them that Cleveland is open for business. And so that's part of the important work. I think that's the only way that we're going to get to the point that you're speaking of, Councilman. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the director, to note that you're doing that. I'm very appreciative of that, and I'm very thankful that you are our director, and I'm thankful for the work that you're doing in our neighborhoods, in our community. We appreciate it tremendously, but just wanted to kind of like bring that out. So I'm glad that that's moving, because I've been talking about that for quite some time. How do we add that into our housing plan? How do we we begin the process to look at developers and then letting them know that we're open for Cleveland. Cleveland is open for business in terms of moving our city down the road, increasing our population, improving our educational system, and making our citizens safe. So all three of those areas for me is very important. And I appreciate the work, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. I'm just thankful we got a good director and a great team that's in play right here, right now. And then for Mr. Tony Bango, I look forward to going out with you and just taking a look at some of the housing stock and stuff that we're doing. And it's something else. It's, to ask you this information on the average rent, for me, was kind of like shocking. I didn't know those numbers were so high. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman Spencer.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had a point on sort of the line of questioning that Councilman Jones has been asking. One of the points you made, just to pull that out through the chair, I thought for a hot minute the city of Cleveland did have a gap financing program for single-family infill. Does anyone recall this program and how it was funded in the past through the chair?
McCormick?
Thank you. Yeah, the former councilman Brigatelli created that for that new trail side. Thank you, Councilman Moore. Trail side. I don't know exactly what the fund was, but there was a specific fund. It wasn't specific for trail side, but he grabbed it all up and used it on trail side. Good for him. I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad. I don't know, but they took it all over there in Slavic Village, so in Ward 12.
Thank you. Does anyone from the CD team recall this single-family infill gap financing? We had it for a hot minute. I don't remember how long ago, but yeah, I believe you.
Yeah, no, there was bond funds. It was a sale of bonds, and it was around $3 million. And once it was exhausted, it was exhausted.
So I think this goes to my earlier point, Mr. Chair. I think there are other sources of funds, whether, like you said, when we come to our budget hearings, what does council want to put forward? We have evidence of bond funds having been used successfully in the past for gap financing for single-family infill. Is that a model we might want to replicate? So I think there are some options that can be explored.
And Mr. Chairman, on that point,
Councilman Jones.
and Mr. Chairman, on that point, because you heard our distinguished colleague Kerry McCormick talk about how $3 million in bond funds were put in play for gap financing, but one council member took advantage of the whole thing. As a council member at this end of the table, I believe in fair is fair. If you give $1 billion on the other side of town, give me $1 billion too. So I would say, Mr. Chairman, that if we could establish a fund like that for gap financing, that we be able to split it up in territories where we can receive our fair share of gap financing to spur economic development, regardless of the fact that we may have a developer or not. And here's why, Mr. Chairman. Some neighborhoods don't have good, strong development corporations. And because they don't have a good, strong development corporation, they can't have what we call the shovel-ready projects. And so then all the money then is absorbed by neighborhoods who have strong economic development corporations and financial institutions that help them to move their neighborhoods along a lot quicker than other communities and neighborhoods. So in order to keep things equitable and fair, Mr. Chairman, we should allocate those resources. We know those resources there, and as council members, we can go and try to get someone on the market to be able to get that and start using that. Because I had a developer, Mr. Chairman, who asked me, well, do we have gap financing? So if I come in here, I know that these houses are going to cost me so much money to build. So if you build a regular market rate home today, you're at $325,000 very quickly. And then you have to make a profit off of that 325. You're looking at 350 actually selling the house. And that gap financing for neighborhoods like mine, Mr. Chairman, becomes really critical if you're going to build a house in the neighborhood or not. And if you don't have if the city doesn't have that incentive system in place and the financial assistance from our financial institutions in play, it makes it almost impossible to develop and build, or even start to develop and build homes in a Lee Harvard neighborhood that's sorely needed, Mr. Chairman. So I would just ask that if we do this, that gap financing should not just be used up just like that, because we had a whole lot of that gap financing, and before I could turn around and say lickety-split, it was gone. I said, well, where did it go so fast? It was done. The money was zapped up, and I think Rebecca Maurer told me about it, that it was zapped just like she blinked her eyes right down there. It's gone. So I'd like to have some of those funds set to aside for my neighborhood, because she done blinked her eyes twice, so that's $60 million gone. And so at the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, I just think that we need to make it fair and equitable for all communities. Thank you.
Got you, Councilman. Thank you for your comments. I don't think we have anyone else signed up. Councilman McCormack, got another question?
Thank you. No, I
Okay.
appreciate.
Then we'll go back to Councilwoman
Two very
Spencer.
quick things. One, to both councilmembers' point, Trailside I think is a really good example. It's beautiful. It's a great housing development, I think. And so I think it's a story of success of what the city can do. And unlike the money coming out of the sewers in my ward, apparently, I know Slavic Village needed that shot. It still needs more, but it's a good example of that. Chair, briefly, and I've said this before too, I want to recognize the director and her team. Once again, we are looking at systems and processes and figuring out now not just how we've always done it, but how can we innovate and do things differently. And I again want to recognize that, because this is not the first time you've been in front of us saying, we get it, we're changing systems, we're pushing boundaries, we're trying new things. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you again for that, because this is a consistent, consistent approach that you've brought to the table. So I want to recognize that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to my earlier math problem I was trying to do a little bit earlier this afternoon, talking about that the Chodo set aside, if you will, for home, and noticing that total home this year, the award is $4.2 million, so it's $630,000 set aside for Chodo projects, Chodo developed projects. My last question through the chair is, in the event that a Chodo does not submit or does not have a large enough request to use that full amount, what happens with the Chodo set aside? Can it be reallocated to the Housing Trust Fund generally, or what happens if those dollars are not used by a Chodo?
So through the chair to the councilwoman, we have to use those funds for a Chodo. We would probably wait for a project in next year, hopefully, to find a Chodo for it. Luckily for us, we have a number of repeat customers in the Housing Trust Fund. Many of them qualify as Chodos. I already know, based on the awards we got this year, that there are 2 Chodo-eligible projects in there.
All right, so we expect the funds to be used. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman. Quickly, how many Chodo projects do we have right now, and where are they located?
Through the chair to the councilman, I don't know the one that was awarded this year, the 2 that are awarded this year, I don't know off the top of my head what wards they're in. The one for last year is in Ward 1.
Where?
It's in Ward 1.
What product?
That's
project
Hope
is it?
Homes?
That's with the Cleveland Housing Network.
That's correct.
So we looked at that probably 4 years ago when they came to me concerning that. So you're saying that right now they're going to get ready to start doing development, right?
Through the chair to the council person, I suspect will be closed.
Right.
And shovels and dirt August, maybe July.
Okay. So then you'll get with me, Mr. Bango, on that, some more details. And then you said you don't know what ward, is it on the east side or the west side, the second program?
Through the chair to the council person, there are 2, and I think one's on the east side and one's on the west side, but one of them I think is maybe Ward 16, and then I can't
how
remember
many
the other.
units is it?
Through the chair to the council person, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I know we have these here that you were talking about has 232 units. So for Ward 1, how many units are we talking about having? How many houses are we talking about building? Is it 3 or 4?
Through the chair to the council person, I think it's 30 for Hope Homes
In Ward 1,
in Ward 1, yes.
30 homes?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Again,
So-
I don't have the numbers in front of
Yeah,
me.
so Mr. Chairman, the distinguished gentleman in the administration really fundamentally needs to sit down and talk to me then, because that wasn't what I was under the impression. So, and then, so let's do that sooner than later, because I don't want them coming over my neighborhood building cheap houses. So we have to get on that on the top end right away. And so, Mr. Chairman, we ain't gonna have those cheap houses out in my neighborhood. They're gonna have to build me quality homes. I've already told them that. I have been to some of their properties, and so, we just ain't gonna have no cheap housing. And so, this is urgent, Mr. Chairman, to the director. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. I would like, just briefly, if we can bring Trudy up to the table. Trudy, just to, she is leading a new, come on down, Trudy, a new arm, as the director laid out in the presentation. Trudy has dealt with us in these vacant school sites, whether it's land, whether it's buildings. A lot of them have come through already. And so briefly here, Trudy does not have it, because I'm throwing this on here. She does not have a listing of kind of where each project is, but I thought it was important for her to come up and just kind of share with us some of the work that she's doing and what aspects that she's working on. All right, but they're gonna follow up with us with a list of where we are with those school sites and other assets, redevelopment sites that are across the city, including JFK site in your ward and others. Councilman Jones. Trudy.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Council.
Afternoon.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and that is something I can do in the very near term
Yes.
to prep an update on where we are, both with the school sites that we administered an RFQ process for in 2021, as well as an update on everything we've been working on in the past year since Director Hernandez established our Asset Redevelopment Office. I can provide a quick update right now, just to say that in March, we administered an RFQ opportunity for the Fullerton site in Councilwoman Moore's ward. We had an initial kickoff meeting with the potential project team just last week, and look forward to squaring away an MOU with them in the month of June. We also just wrapped up on May 20th, responses were due for 3 catalytic redevelopment sites in the Lee Harvard area. So the former JFK site, which is 14 acres right at Lee Harvard, the former Gracemount site, which is about a 3-acre site, half a block off of Lee Road, and then a 1.7-acre site on Miles Avenue. We received 10 responses for that RFQ, which was a pretty great response for an area that hasn't seen that level of development in quite some time. I am very much all about collaborative and iterative processes, so I would love any feedback on scoring criteria, on processes. We are always trying to improve. But those are a couple that have been in the queue in the past couple of months, and looking forward to the next ones to come. But I'll definitely provide an update to you, I would say within the next 2 weeks, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Great.
All right, thank you, Trudy. I thought, that's important to know. Trudy is working on not only school sites, but even large swaths of land that we have in our land bank as well, like the Grace Mountain site and others. And she's going to provide us an update, kind of where we are with kind of all of the projects she's been working on for the past couple of years with this administration and under former Chief Ripka as well, because a lot of them have carried over into to 2024 as well. All right. I see Councilman Jones' hand up. Councilman Jones.
Mr. Chairman, let me just first, I think Trudy is a dream. She works very hard. I want my hats off to Justin Bibb and his administration for having such a great team. Trudy has, whenever I've called her, she's always been responsive. She's always taken care of business, and she's always kept me in the loop. So I never not know where something is, because she makes sure that I'm there, I'm a part of it, and I'm appreciative of that, knowing where these projects are and where they stand. We were talking earlier, and I had asked a question, Mr. Chairman. We can get it later if you don't have the answer. This was the Robert Fulton site where they were supposed to do the development, and I haven't really heard anything back from the developer on this. I know that the last time that I was engaged with the process, we went out to go and take a look and see what type of housing construct that they were talking about putting together. So I was impressed with how they did things. And I was also impressed with the three-dimensional, development. I don't know if you had a chance to do that, put the goggles on and see how these people can be in your ear and tell you how to put in plumbing and where to go and how that is on the screen. I thought that was quite impressive. So, but that was the last time I've heard of the group. I haven't heard anything back since lately. So I don't know where they're at in the project and what is the timeline talking about LIHTC projects.
Through the chair to the councilman, unfortunately, that project is not moving forward. It contemplated demolition of the site and then new construction as you described. I would be interested to share with everyone their technology, though they're definitely a project team that we're excited to partner with in the future. They use an AI model to show contractors how the new construction facilities will be, developed on site. It's a really interesting product that I would love to see across Cleveland more and more. But anyway, I will provide an update on that project in the written update that I provide to the chair, who will then, I think, circulate with you all. We are hoping to continue our partnership with the school district on that one for redevelopment later this year. That is still a CMSD-owned property.
I see. So hopefully we can maybe put another RFQ out for that site location?
That is our intention, but we're in the early stages of talking about it, and we'll be sure to connect with you before we make any formal next steps.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you for the work that you do, Trudy.
Thank you,
And
Councilman. Trudy, please make sure Councilman Jones is a part of that process every step of the way to make sure that it is something that he absolutely, wants to see happen in his neighborhood. All right. Thank you. All right, listen, see no further questions. We've gotten through the first day on our housing rehab and development programs. Tomorrow we'll pick back up here at 9 a.m. sharp. But before we go, Director, can we still make sure, like the information we typically receive with breakout by ward, the B&H work that we fund, the grass cuts, if we have those, the gardens that we normally receive, our home awards, we've seen, not by ward, but just the past 2 years, the home awards that's been given out, and those are in the queue. By ward, the home repair programs that people apply for, whether it's tree trimming, whether it's shaft, rod, so forth, and kind of where we are in terms of us. I know we recently got our storefront booklet, but you also previously provided us kind of that storefront breakdown as well. So all those the information that we would typically receive in a larger book. We want to make sure that we still receive that information. All right? All right, listen, good first day. We'll see everyone tomorrow, and thank you, everyone, for your time today. All right? All right. We'll recess until tomorrow.